Hello and welcome to another training module with Resource Compliance. My name is Uriah Donaldson, an account manager and process safety consultant. Our goal as a consulting firm is to provide solutions and simplify regulation. And with that in mind, these modules are intended to provide introductory level information on a variety of process safety topics. Now, in this module, we'll be discussing ammonia refrigeration daily inspections. This training will simply walk through the primary aspects of a template inspection checklist and feature some pictures from various facilities. Now, before we get right into walking through this checklist, let me just make a few observations. First, notice on the far left side, you'll see the major components, the gauge board, the compressor, and next to each component are the inspection items. You'll see suction pressure, discharge pressure, etc. Then if you go one item more or one column more to the right, you'll see the operating parameters. Now, it's important to ensure any inspection checklist is properly customized to your specific facility with the actual normal parameters for your site. The big idea of performing a daily inspection is that you're wanting to make sure your system as a whole and each individual component is running within the normal parameters. So if at any point you notice a component is outside the normal parameters, you want to notify your supervisor or contractor or whoever is responsible for troubleshooting and repairing your equipment. Now, the first item that is shown here on this template is the gauge board, which will show the house pressures for suction and discharge. Now, a gauge board can be vertical, like the one shown here, or horizontal. Typically, most systems will have a gauge board, but in the case your facility does not, there should be some place to read the house pressures so that you can record that information. It's important to note that the house pressure at the gauge board will differ just slightly from what you'll read at any individual compressor because the gauge board is going to be tied into the mains rather than the individual compressor. So if your facility has multiple suction pressures, then your gauge board should reflect that. So it's entirely possible you could have 3 or 4 different gauges here rather than just 2 as is shown in this picture. Now, looking at the second component listed, much of this information will be able to be gathered from the microprocessor on a screw compressor or on a compressor in general. So here's an example of a Frick microprocessor. This is fairly new, at least at the time of this recording, and as you noted in that first inspection item is runtime hours, so you can see that highlighted here in red. Now, on older compressors or recip compressors without a more modern microprocessor, the information will more likely be gathered from pressure gauges or other instruments. Now, for runtime hours specifically, there's often going to be an analog dial similar to an odometer that you'd find on a car, which will record the compressor's runtime hours as is shown here. Now, the next inspection item on our list is going to be the oil level. When you look at a screw compressor, there will always be at least 3 sight glasses. In between sight glass 1, 2, and 3 is going to be a coalescer. Now, in this picture, you can see 2 sight glasses on the left and 1 on the right. The sight glass on the right is going to be the one downstream of the coalescer. This sight glass should be empty. You shouldn't have any oil in that one. Now, here's a zoomed in picture of the 2 sight glasses on the left. Now, the sight glass, which is positioned lower, that one should be full of oil, and the sight glass on the top should be partially full. If you look closely, you can see the top sight glass is just over half full. Now, here's a picture of the sight glass number 3, the one downstream of the coalescer, and is shown here. You shouldn't see any oil in that sight glass. For recip compressors, there's going to be just a single sight glass rather than 3 like on screw compressors. And when inspecting this sight glass, it should be at least half full or more. Now on a newer screw compressor, alarms are always going to be checked on the microprocessor. But if you're looking at older compressors or older recip compressors, alarms will generally have something like pen switches with indicator lights, which would light up in alarm situations or something similar to that. Now, the next several items on the checklist are items which can all typically be found on the microprocessor: your suction temperature and pressure, discharge temperature and pressure, as well as oil temperature and oil filter pressure. So here's another example of a panel. You'll see SP and ST, which is suction pressure and temperature, and then we have DP and DT on the right for discharge pressure and temperature, and then in the middle we have OT and OF for oil temperature and oil filter pressure. So this is just one example. So you'll just need to figure out at your site where this information is located, but it should look somewhat similar. Now, just one note back on our template. Notice that we have liquid injection, thermosiphon, and water-cooled options for discharge temperature. A compressor is only going to have one of those options. So again, it's important to customize your inspection checklist for your equipment. Now, generally, only on more modern microprocessors are you going to have information like motor amps or slide valve percentage. So again, here's an example of that Frick Quantum HD panel that was shown earlier, and you can see the motor amps listed just there on the left. Now for condensers, you should see the inspection items are a little bit less involved than they were with compressors. You're going to be looking at fans, water pump, and belts. Generally, this is just going to be a visual check. So you'll most likely just be walking around your condenser, looking to see if the fans are running, see if the water pump's running, and then especially you're listening for any unusual noises related to the fan belts to see. You can kind of hear if they're loose or if they're getting worn out. So you just want to be paying attention to any unusual noises related to that. Now for the high pressure receiver is going to be the primary storage vessel for ammonia not being used throughout the rest of the system. And the inspection item here calls for inches. This is simply going to be a measurement for how much ammonia is in the receiver during the time of inspection. Now, the inspection item can be changed to a different unit of measure, but the primary objective is to make sure the ammonia level does not exceed 80 to 85%. Now, some facilities will have their bullseye column marked with inches or percentage or something similar so that the operators have something to read during their daily inspections and record. I do recall one facility actually painted the sight glass, which marked the 85% level a bright yellow color, and instructed their employees performing daily rounds that they should not see ammonia in that sight glass, because that would indicate that there was too much ammonia over the operating parameter of 85%. Now, the last item that we will discuss on this daily inspection checklist is going to be the diffusion tank. So many of your facilities may not have a diffusion tank, but for those of you who do, it is important to check the water and pH level. Regarding the water level, you should have some sort of gauge which will tell you how much water is in the tank, and either marked on your inspection sheet or the vessel itself, as is shown here by fill level. There should be some sort of indication that tells you how much water should be in the tank so that you know if water needs to be added or not. As for the pH level, this is something you don't need to check every day, but we do suggest testing the water at least once a week. And anything above a 10 on the pH scale is going to be a strong indication that a relief valve has lifted or is definitely leaking by. And that concludes this module on ammonia refrigeration daily inspections. If you have any questions about this training or have ideas for other topics that you would like to see covered in future modules, you can contact us at our website, resourcecompliance.com, or give us a call at the office. Thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you in the next module.